Hi everyone, welcome to MMA the Beginning, where we talk about the early days of MMA. Now, the first guest I had on, I couldn't believe I got him on. He's a hero of mine, he's an absolute legend, he's a pioneer of MMA, he's a UFC super fight champion, he's the king of pancreas. I could go on and on and on about this guy's credentials, but we'd be here all day. He's got a book out at the minute called The World's Most Dangerous Man, which is on his website, which is www.kenshamrock.com. Yes, I managed to get an interview with the world's most dangerous man, Ken Shamrock. Here's how the podcast went down. Mr. Shamrock, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. I believe you've been doing some filming for Impact.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, great stuff. Basically, I just want to talk about the early UFCs because I don't think it gets documented enough. And I was actually in Vegas in January, and I was watching the McGregor and Cerrone press conference, and I was talking to these guys next to me, and they were like, "Oh, the reason I've gone into MMA is because of Conor McGregor." I'm like, "Have you not seen any of the early UFCs? Have you not seen UFC 1?" He was like, "No." I was offended. I'm not going to lie. I was offended. First of all, before we move on to all that, how's everything in the States with the COVID-19? How have you been managing to sort of keep your training regime going?
Well, I think the hardest thing for me is dealing with the media, the news. It just seems like everybody's lying. Like you can't get the truth out of anybody.
It's depressing, isn't it?
Yes, very.
It got to the point where I've just stopped watching these live updates because I just think it's just getting me down. You know what I mean? Telling me, first of all, my gigs have been cancelled, so that's depressing enough. And then obviously they're telling me that I can't go to the gym anymore. I can't socialise. Do you know what I mean? And I'm just thinking, so I've stopped watching it and I feel much better.
Everything that the human race is built on, which is helping people, talking to people, and caring for people, have all been thrown out the window with this COVID by saying 6 feet, don't talk to anybody, don't gather around and have fun, don't do this, don't do that, don't go enjoy yourself, stay at home.
I know. I mean, because I've seen on a couple of things that you've said on Twitter, and you sort of did spark a little. There was a few people that were going absolutely crazy with you, weren't there? And I was just like, look, if someone hasn't, see, this is the problem with Twitter, isn't it? There's so many dicks on Twitter. I'm sorry. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can't have an opinion without 100 people swarming at you. You know, everyone should be entitled to what they think. And I think when it comes to COVID, when I've looked into things, I've just thought, do you know what? Obviously, if you've got underlying health conditions, stay home. But it's affecting the economy massively. And I think if people are not going to die from COVID-19, which to be fair, they're going to die of depression. They're going to bloody hang themselves,
They're going to die of starvation because they can't pay their bills.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. And I mean, that's what I was worried about. I seen all these gigs getting cancelled and I was just like, what am I going to do? I'm going to go into depression. I'm going to eat myself to death. I'm going to drink too much alcohol. You know what I mean? I just thought, what am I going to do? Anyway, let's... what I wanted to ask you as well, you get this all the time, but you're in incredible shape.
Thank you.
What has your training regime been? Because obviously gyms have been closed and stuff like that. Have you been doing free weights? Have you at home, or have you been doing like sort of planks and stuff like that?
Yeah, it goes back to the old Lions Den training in the earlier days. We do squats and push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, things that you don't really need to go to the gym for, running. But the hardest thing I think for most people when they're used to going to a gym is that the landscape has changed. It's not the same. So they kind of they don't feel motivated if they're not in a gym. So that's the hard part, is just motivating yourself to do stuff that you're not normally used to doing, because now, when you go to the gym, you got everything there for you that's fit, and you feel like you jump on a machine, you could do this, you can jump on a treadmill, and you don't got to go anywhere. But when you're at home and there's none of that stuff, you've got to kind of find things to do, like push-ups, or go to the park and do pull-ups where they've got a jungle bar. Just anything that you can do to just try to stay fit. But it's really hard for people who don't have that creative mind or that willpower to want to train. So
Yeah.
it's really difficult right now, I think, with the way things are, especially since this COVID thing has come up. It's easy for people to give up and quit. And that's something I think is dangerous.
Absolutely. Like I was saying earlier, it's your mental health. And I think when it comes to exercises, I mean, going back to the Lion's Den, I was going to talk about this at the end, but I thought whilst we're on the subject, there was a test to get into the Lion's Den, wasn't there? Because you mentioned about squats. Like, so I actually read your book, Inside the Lion's Den, when it, a few years ago when it came out. I mean, the criteria to get into the Lion's Den was crazy. I mean, I read that and I was like 18 at the time and I thought I was fit then, right? And I looked at what you needed to do to get into the Lion's Den and I was just like, wow. Would you like to remind all the listeners what the criteria was to get into the Lion's Den?
Yeah, really the Lion's Den, the tryouts that we did were more based upon the ability for no one to be able to do it. And the idea was that to get the mental preparation for somebody that I wanted to train that would not quit, that would just keep going until someone said, okay, stop. But in the mind, they were thinking they really had to do it. So we pushed them to a point that nobody humanly possible could pass these tryouts with flying colors. But what we were looking for was the mental strength, guys that kept getting up, that kept going, that wouldn't quit, especially at the end when you had to fight after working out for 8 hours and your body's completely drained. And now you got to go in there and fight somebody who's fresh, a professional fighter, and just get your butt kicked. But you had to go in and you had to keep going. That's the mentality. If I could get somebody, which it proved out to be true because we had a lot of world champions, is that if I can get a mentality like that and train them, I can turn them into a world champion.
Yeah. I mean, because when I saw people coming through the Lion's Den, because you have people like Guy Metzger, Jerry Boland, and Mikey Burnett, when I knew they come from your gym, which to be fair, your gym was the first official MMA gym, wasn't it? Because obviously you got AK and people like that. Now, Lion's Den was the first official one, wasn't it?
Yeah, it is. It was the very first mixed martial arts or no holds barred fight team. And we were organized. So it was the first real organized team where guys trained together. They traveled together. So they cornered each other. So it was really the very first organized team.
It was crazy actually, because I remember I was watching your fighters, and you were in their corner. And I thought, if I was a fighter and I could have anybody in my corner shouting at me and keeping me going, it would be Ken. I mean, I'm surprised you actually didn't scare their opponent, because, I mean, I remember there was one point you were just like crawling around the cage. Do you know what I mean? Because I don't think there was sort of rules back then to sort of say, what, you've got to stay in this corner and you've got to stay in this corner. You were just sort of going round and you were, I think the most I remember you really going for it was Metzger's first fight, I think, with Tito. Do you know what I mean? And I was just like, wow, I just love. And going back to Guy Metzger, actually, because he fought in UFC 4, didn't he? Was he training with you then? I don't think he was he?
No, his first fight, he actually went in there and fought, but that's how we met, was that he had actually seen me fight in the very first UFC, and then then second. He said, I want to train with that guy, basically to his friends, and they all thought he was crazy. Well, after I met him, I invited him up because I thought he had all kinds of skill, and I thought he'd be a great addition to the Lion's Den team. Can he make the tryouts though? That's the question. I didn't care how good somebody was. I just want to make sure mentally they were strong. And so when I invited him up, he did a tryout. He passed with flying colors. Not too many guys do. In fact, I think he was probably one of my strongest finishers. And it showed in his career. He was very well organized. He was very disciplined, and he was very skilled. So he did really well with us, and he carried the name very well.
Brilliant. But going back to the first UFC, how did you find out about this? Because when you first found out about, these guys are just going to be going into a cage and beating the shit out of each other, and there's literally like just 3 rules, you must have thought this has got to be a joke. Someone's put this up on a wall like as a joke. This can't be happening, surely.
Yeah, that was really my first thought, because I was already fighting over in Japan in a mixed martial arts organization with Pancrase. I was the champion. And then when I saw this thing, I was like, yeah, that's not happening. It's like, it's a pro wrestling thing. Zach, one of my students at the time, told me, no, man, it's real. And I looked at him because he, I was like, you don't know what real is. I said, this can't be real. There's no way they're going to sanction this. You can't do this stuff only in the movies. He goes, no, I'm telling you, man, I know this. They're saying you can go in and you can just fight. And there's no rules. And they're trying to find out who the best discipline is. And I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot. So I remember talking to Art Davies and asking, is this for real? And he goes, oh yeah. I was like, all right, well, I want to fight in it. And he basically said, well, what's your background? Because I was over in Japan, nobody knew who I was. And so I said, well, I fight in this organization over in Japan called Pancrase, the champion. He goes, well, what is it? And I said, well, it's kind of a mixture between wrestling and kickboxing. And he kind of just, his ears perked up. He's like, what? Because that's what basically this event was. And it had never been seen before. Only the Gracies did this stuff, but they didn't strike. They just grappled. And
yeah.
He was like, okay, but he didn't believe me, right? Because nobody ever heard of it. So I remember he had to do some research, and it was very quickly. I got a call back and said, you're in. So he saw some. Art Davies, along with a few other people in the UFC, saw me as a competitive tool to help create this world that they were looking at with Gracie coming in. Instead of just destroying everybody, they were looking for that one guy that they thought, the discipline and the style of fighting would match up well for a great competition. And so I think that was what really happened there. I think Art and some people really saw an opportunity for me to come in and really put some competition to the Gracies, because really everybody else, they were all just strikers, and there was nobody that was going to stay standing in this type of event.
Yeah, it's scary when you look back and you go, like, if you go to an MMA gym now, everyone is well-rounded. Everybody knows how to grapple. Everybody knows how to strike. Whereas back in the day, people believed, obviously, before UFC 1 came out, my martial art's the best. My martial art's the best. I do taekwondo. I can knock somebody out with a spinning hoop kick. And then there's a judo guy going, well, I've got the best throws. And then what I loved about this is it just proved that you need to be able to fight on the floor. And I mean, I remember when you got interviewed after you beat Pat Smith, and they says, how was this for you? Like, as opposed to fighting in Japan, everyone. Yeah, you said easier. And they were like, why? He was like, because he did no submission, And I do remember as well on the commentary, there was Kathy Long. Obviously, she was world kickboxing champion, along with Bill the Superfoot Wallace, who, I mean, he was a badass in his time. I mean, he had a roundhouse kick that was 60 miles an hour, Yeah. And when I remember you talking about this once in an interview, and they didn't know what the move was that you got him in. Obviously, we know was it a heel hook you got him with? It was a heel hook, wasn't it? Yeah. Yes. And I think, what was it? They said, oh, he got him in like a foot lock or something. Like they were confused about. Yeah. Yeah, they were confused about what it was. And I mean, you can clearly tell that Pat Smith had never fought any grappler before, because he didn't know what you were doing. He was obviously trying to axe kick you in the head when you were sort of in the position to get the heel hook on. And I mean, I've never seen someone tap with both hands in so much pain. It's like he was trying to put the mat through. He was like this, wasn't he, to tap when you got him with that submission.
The funny thing on that was, but just before we started to fight, they put up on this big screen, Patrick Smith says, I feel no pain.
Well, he certainly did, didn't he? I mean, God, he clearly hasn't been submitted by someone, but that was, it was actually, I mean, I don't mean to sound awful, but it was quite funny to see someone learn the reality of submission, you know what I mean? So then obviously after you fought Pat Smith, you must have been on a confidence boost. You must have thought, well, obviously Hoist Gracie knows how to grapple. I am in probably the best shape of your life at the time. I'm a lot stronger than him. Clearly, this is a guy, he's a judo-esque type guy. But obviously at the time you didn't really, because I seen when you fought him, you were going for a leg lock at the time, and he sort of manipulated you, and that's when he used his own gi to get you in the choke. What was going through your mind before the first ever Hoist Gracie fight?
Yeah, I was pretty confident I was going to win the whole thing. The only one I thought that had a shot against me, when it was a very small shot, was Gerard Godot, because I knew him from Japan, and I knew he's a great striker. But I knew that all I got to do is get him to the ground and game's over. So that's who I thought I would be fighting. And going in to fight Hoist, I studied him, but I never really fought anybody that had wore a gi or being able to use a gi like that, where he literally just wrapped my arm in his gi when I went to sit back. And normally I'm really strong, and I was able to, even guys that are my size, I'm able to break their arms apart and they can't do anything to me. Well, when you do the gi is like, I mean, you're not going to rip the gi. You're not going to outpower the gi. And so that really was an eye opener for me going into that. That was one of my first experiences of a humble pie, because I really walked in there believing there's no way this guy could beat me. And I didn't study it. I didn't really go into depth on how that gi worked and what that gi did for somebody that was not as strong as I was. It equalized strength, and things that I would normally have advantage over, it took that away. And so basically somebody as good as Hoist was, and I think this is what gets lost, is that Hoist had 23 to 25 years of experience in the jiu-jitsu system, along with probably 50 plus years with his family in this type of fighting. Yeah. And so going into this thing, everybody looked at me, and even into our rivalry, everybody looked at me as being comparable to him. Like I was the guy that could beat him, and I was. But what they didn't realize was that I had 2.5 years of experience as a professional fighter. And Hoyt had all of that experience behind him. And right from the get-go, I was fighting an uphill battle, not only with the rule changes and the family running the organization, but also with the skill sets. I was nowhere near their skill sets. I was just a great athlete and had great athletic ability, and I was a fighter. And that's basically all I had. And to do what I did in that time, if you were to look at it from 30,000 feet up and see where I came from and see the experience that I had, and then you look at Hoist and of course lying about his weight. You know, he was 1 inch taller than me. His shoulders were wider than mine. He put a gi on and he was thinner, but he was taller. His shoulders were wider, and he was only 10 pounds lighter than me. So it wasn't a huge weight advantage.
Someone with that skill set, 10 pounds is nothing. Do you know what I mean?
No, especially with the gi, when you're talking about the gi and someone knowing how to use it and someone not knowing how to use it. And again, like I said, nothing. I mean, Hoist fought a tremendous fight. He did what he had to do to win. But for me, it was really an experience where it was humbling, because I realized that there was more out there than what I was doing when it came to the stand up in the ground and fighting and stuff, that there was a whole lot more sports and a whole lot more disciplines out there than what I was doing, and that could be comparable to what I was doing. And so that's when I really started opening my mind up and started learning everything.
So after that fight with Hoist, then, did you think, do you know what, I'm going to learn some Gracie Jiu-Jitsu along with the stuff that I was also learning when I was fighting in Japan?
Yeah, I actually went down to Los Angeles. Me and Funaki, Suzuki, some of the Japanese representatives, we actually flew from Japan after one of our fights together, and we all went down to LA and we rolled with Machados. So we had experience and started to understand this discipline and system, and it did well for me for my second fight.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, because I remember when I saw Hoist use the gi to his advantage, and because I used to train in a gym in Hartley, well, I still do occasionally. I'll go maybe once every other month because I'm on the road all the time normally. And I remember I said to John, the instructor, I went, Hoist Gracie uses his gi to choke people. Because I was doing judo at the time as well. I says, I'm gonna come next week and I'm gonna wear my gi when we spar. So I put my gi on, right, and he literally just pulled it over my head and kneed me in the solar plexus. He was like, You've got to know what you're doing. Do you know what I mean? You can't just rely on. Well, I mean, I think I was like an orange belt at judo at the time as well. Do you know what I mean? But isn't it crazy how things can inspire you when you've seen it?
Yeah, it's different too when you're learning the gi too. Is like it's you don't want to wear it if you don't know how to use it. So, but at the
No.
same time, when Hoist and I were having our little rivalry, I think the one thing that I think that people need to understand is that Hoist Gracie and the system that Hoist Gracie is doing. And a lot of people try to give that credit, but it's not. They try to say that the system that we see in the no holds barred today is what Hoist brought in. And I think to myself, okay, where did Hoist's kickboxing come in? How does that equate to what he does? And that everybody fights from the top and the bottom now, not just from the bottom. And that's where Hoist fought, was on the bottom. So how does that equate? If you really look at the system and you break it down, it's the system I brought in. It's the striking. It's the elbows. It's the knees. It's the takedown. Yeah. It's the catch wrestling on the ground. That is what people are using. So it seems like a lot of this stuff in marketing and people that don't remember that the jiu-jitsu system that people say that they're learning isn't jiu-jitsu. It's catch wrestling.
Yeah, well, I mean, I tell you, it was a prime example of that is Khabib. That just proves that it stands the test of time. I mean, the thing is with Khabib, you watch him fight and you just think, you know what he's going to do. You know he is going to get hold of your legs. He's going to either lift you up, he's going to take you to the floor, and he's just going to absolutely punish you and talk to you at the same time, which would probably piss you off even more. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, so that was, and obviously the Lion's Den was the best, well-rounded gym. Obviously, when you were bringing into the, you know, obviously there was Muay Thai mixed in there, and you were saying about Gerard Gordeau, when you watched him strike in UFC 1, you'd be watching him going, that is neat, that is sharp, the way he's throwing those punches. This guy, and it was interesting because I was going to ask you how you think you would have done against him, but you've obviously answered my question. You said you probably would have had a hard time on the feet, but obviously once you got him on the ground, it would have been a piece of cake. So moving on to UFC 2 then, did you get asked to do UFC 2? Because if I remember rightly, you obviously went in UFC 2.
Yeah, just to be clear on that, with Gerard, because I want to give him credit's due, is that you asked me how I think I would have done. Yeah, absolutely. I think that I would have been able to. It would have been a piece of cake on the ground. But the key is getting him to the ground, because I'd have been a piece of cake to him standing up.
See, that's what I love about you, is your honesty. You know. So yeah, sorry. Going back on to UFC 2. Were you wanting to compete in UFC 2? What happened? I'm sure you must have got asked.
Yeah, I actually broke my hand.
Right.
I was supposed to fight, and I ended up breaking it in training, and so I was out for a few weeks, actually, in UFC 4 or 5, something. I don't remember what it was, but I didn't get to come back until later, just because I broke my hand, and I had commitments in Japan that I had to fulfill also. So I didn't get back to it later on. But once I did, I was able to really show people what they wanted to see, because I know I was a fan favorite after the first one. People were excited to see me face Hoist, and so when I came back for the second fight, I put everything into it, and I ended up in the finals. And then, of course, you know, everybody knows Hoist couldn't continue in that tournament.
And that's what I was going to ask you, because obviously I know you beat Christoph Leininger, who was, you know, really excellent judoka. And then you beat Felix Lee Mitchell, I think it was with a rear naked choke, didn't you, in the semi-finals? And then, so there was talk, right? I've spoken to a few guys in the gym, and we were having this discussion. I thought, right, I'm going to get this from the horse's mouth from Ken. When you fought in UFC 3, were you actually injured, or didn't you want to fight because of the fact that Hoist wasn't in the final with you?
Yeah, I wasn't injured at all.
Wow.
I wanted Hoist, and when I didn't get Hoist, they had some guy from Canada,
Harold Howard,
Harold Howard, and then some other guy who was the alternate that stepped in with me, right?
Steve Jenham. I mean, can you imagine? Yeah, can you imagine going in there as an alternate when all these guys have been working their balls off throughout, you know, for the whole night to get to the final, and he just comes in and wins it? What was it, $100,000, something like that?
Yeah, but to me, it for me to go in and fight Harold Howard in the finals. I mean, I think it's pretty clear. And again, it's just speculation because anything can happen. But on paper, there's no way I even sweat trying to beat him.
I thought that. That's exactly what I thought.
I just felt like, man, I wasn't here for the money. Although money's always an issue. You always want to make money. But I went there for one reason, because I was embarrassed. I literally went and fought Royce and he choked me with this gi, and I didn't prepare. And I was mad at myself for not going in and doing the things I should have done, and taking it for granted. And I got beat. And I literally was upset about that. And everything that my whole world evolved around, even when I fought over in Japan, was I wanted Royce. I needed to get back in the ring with Royce. It's the only way I could fix this. And so I get that opportunity. They give me that shot, and I get in there and I win both of my fights against some pretty good talent. I get there, and all Royce has got to do is go in and beat guys that he should beat, and he doesn't do it. And so I literally lost all the will to fight. I was just like, I didn't come here to win money. I didn't come here for anything other than to fight Royce Gracie.
It was your pride, wasn't it? I suppose, more than anything. You know? And obviously Royce got injured by chemo. That was the first time we saw chemo. I mean, when I saw that, I was like, wow, this guy's coming down and he's got this big crowd. I'm like, mate, you're going to tire yourself out before the fight's even started doing stuff like that. You know, but I think it was a shoulder injury, wasn't it?
No.
Was it not a shoulder injury? What was it?
He was exhausted.
Is that what it was?
Yes.
Wow.
I don't know if something was happening to him. He either didn't. I don't know what it was, but he was because of the fight with chemo. He had just wore himself out, and his body wasn't functioning properly. And so because he walked to the ring. And he went in there, and I fought with a whole lot worse. I mean, I fought with an actual torn ACL. I still fought because I'd been there. I'm not going to back out. I'm going to go in and see whether I can beat the guy with 2 arms and 1 leg. Just me, though. That's just me, though. If I'm in a tournament, I'm not backing out unless it's something that I know I can't do with, like, for instance, a broken hand. That's something that you can't win with, right?
No, but even when you grapple it, even when you're on top mountain, stuff like that, you still, your hand's going to hit the floor when you're trying to do a transition or something like that, you know?
Grabbing, all of it. But an ACL is something that I feel like even in my career, I fought through it, because it's, as long as you don't blow it out, tear tendons and any of that stuff, you can wrap it, wear a brace, do whatever you got to do to keep it stable, because you can still move. So, I mean, that's extreme. I wouldn't suggest it, but that was my mentality. And then to see Royce get tired, like literally he just got, he was drained, and he had no nutrients or supplements or whatever it was that was able to keep him focused enough to be able to go in and fight.
Yeah.
But he walked to the ring, and then he threw in the towel instead of.
I was surprised.
Just to get paid. I mean, it wasn't anything other than for him to enter the ring, allow Harold Howard to go to the finals without having to fight somebody to get there. If he would have just bowed out, knowing he wasn't going to fight, allow somebody else to fight Harold Howard, so when he got to the finals, you know, he earned his way there. He didn't have to get a forfeit. And to me, I thought that was really a poor way. And I also think that they thought I was going to be in the finals. And so by him going in there and throwing in the towel, gave Harold a fresh start into the finals. Even though I don't care if he could, I could have fought 3 fights that night, and I think I still would have beat Harold Howard. He doesn't have the skills.
You would have done. I mean, he said that he'd done jiu-jitsu, but I think it was traditional jiu-jitsu, wasn't it, that he was doing? I don't think it was anything that was, you know, no one else. I think it was all the sort of like Aikido wrist lock jiu-jitsu and all that type of stuff that he was doing, wasn't it? One question I'd love to ask you, Ken, is when I looked at the UFC 3 tournament, Keith Hackney fought Emmanuel Yarbrough. Now, obviously, I think fighting someone like Emmanuel Yarbrough, who was like 600 pounds, if you're a striker and that's your sort of forte, I think that would probably be the best way to beat somebody like Emmanuel Yarbrough. Now, I know that you're a well-rounded fighter, but at the time, I think your grappling was the strongest. Am I right in saying that? So how would you have fought somebody like Yeah. So how would you have, what strategy would you have had going in to fight somebody like Emmanuel Yarbrough?
Yeah, I would have leg kicked him.
Leg kicked him.
Yes, as he's coming in, front kicks to the leg kicks, and then hit him with some punches to get him off balance. Because sooner or later, he's going to get tired and slow down. It'll be easier to get him to the ground. But I think that the best way with somebody like that, because they're not fast, is you just throw leg kicks, their hands drop, throw a right hand, left hook, keep moving till he can't go no more, because you don't want to get on the bottom.
Well, exactly, yeah. I mean, I suppose it's exactly like when Marco Huas fought Paul Valens, wasn't it? You know, he chopped him down like a tree. And then eventually you could see, I mean, obviously Paul Valens was a tough guy. I mean, you know, he was what, 6'6", 350 pounds, something like that. You know, and eventually his legs just give in. Yeah. So yeah, moving on to UFC 5, obviously talking about, we've spoken about Royce quite a lot, haven't we, to be honest? Moving on to UFC 5, Royce Gracie, the super fight. Now, this is something everybody wanted to see. How do you feel about how that fight went? Because personally, if I'm going on looking at people's faces after the fight, you clearly won by unanimous decision. The Gracies clearly had a lot to say in that fight when they actually went into the overtime, because you were obviously on the floor. You were in his guard for quite a long time. But the fact that you know how, you know, good this guy's submissions are and how skillful he is, you know, I thought you played it perfectly, because you were just waiting, you were hitting him with body shots in the air. You weren't giving him anything. So for them to say it's a draw, there must have been questions and speculation after that all went down, and says, come on, we've got to have judges in this. But at the time, they knew that, clearly they must have knew that Royce lost.
Yeah, I think that if when you look at a fight, and not all the time, if it's close, you know, it's different. But if you look at a fight, I mean, you should be able to tell who won. I mean, that's as clear as it is, right? I mean, that's what you really want to see, unless a guy gets knocked out by a lucky punch because the guy's getting beat up and he throws a wild punch and he takes him down, he's losing the whole fight. Most of the time, you're going to be able to look at the fight at the end of the fight and go, he lost.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
that's what
that was, come on, I know this is an exaggerated analogy, right? But if that was in the school playground and there was a group of people around and it was Royce, and they saw Royce's face after that, they would clearly know who won the fight. Do you know what I mean? Because then obviously you fought again later on. Now, I saw that fight, and if I'm honest with you, Ken, because I'm a huge fan of yours, I was devastated for you, because I sort of thought, was I scared? Because if you look at his skill set, obviously, you know, you were saying 2.5 years of experience you had to his, you know, 18, 19 years that he had. You've clearly caught up to him with regards to skill. Yeah. You're stronger than him. You're a better striker than him. When he needs you, and obviously you couldn't continue, well, obviously he needs you, and then he started hitting you, and the ref stopped it. You know, obviously they should have stopped the fight with a groin strike and then got you back fighting again. I heard you say to him after that, you've done that on purpose. Right. Do you think he did?
Well, I do. I want to go back a little bit too when you talk about the second fight and the experience in that. I think people need to realize going into a fight that they all said that I was in his guard and I didn't do anything. And I thought to myself, why would someone say that on their side when you're looking at it and go, where is your wheelhouse? Where do you do most of your damage at? In the guard. They want you in their guard. But what they want you to do is they want you to pass the guard, because then you open up more submissions for them to be able to attack you with. So in my mind, I said, I don't have the skill sets to go hand to hand with him in movement. I just don't have the experience. So the only way I'm going to beat this guy is by turning the game plan around on them and say, you move. I'm not going to move. I'm just going to beat on you, headbutt you, knee you in the butt, and make you move like you do with your heel things to try to get the guy to move in the guard. So all I did was take the game plan that they were trying to use on me, and I flipped it and used it on them. But when I did that, I wasn't fighting. I didn't come to fight. So it doesn't make sense. Like, all I was doing using the same game plan that you were going to use on me.
Absolutely.
So that's all that was. So, and I ended up beating them at it, at their own game plan. I beat them at it.
You did.
Going into the third fight, I truly believe Royce knew that this was different. This fight was different. I wasn't inexperienced. I wasn't the young guy on the block anymore that couldn't go with him. You know, he had been bigger. He was 195 pounds. I weighed 202 pounds, even less this time. So his weight was the same weight division. We go in there, and my whole game plan was to just knock his ass out. And so I was going to cut the ring off on him, wait for him to slow down because I knew he'd be wild. I knew he'd be all running all over the place because he was going to be nervous and scared.
Yeah.
And so I knew he'd be running all over the place. And so I slowly, methodically cut the ring off on him till I got him into a clinch. And then I was going to throw uppercuts. And then I was going to throw a right hand. And then I was just going to start beating on him and wearing him down. Unfortunately, the minute I threw an uppercut, he throws a knee, hits me right in the groin. And I had a steel cup on. And because if I hadn't had a steel cup on, I'd have went down like a sack quick. But
Absolutely.
because I had the steel cup on, it radiated. Like it literally radiated, vibrated through my whole groin until it went into my gut. And I felt like I was going to throw up. And that's why I folded like that, was because I was trying to fight the pain. And it eventually just took my wind away. I couldn't fight anymore. And that's when I dropped.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you know, he's hitting with these punches that were like,
they were like that.
Yeah, they were flies. But I'm looking up at as he's hitting me, I'm looking at the referee screaming at him. He hit me in the nuts.
Yeah.
He hit me in the nuts trying to get him to let me up. And instead he stopped the fight. And I was like, oh, you're kidding me. You didn't see that?
Yeah. I mean, after that, did you say to him, can we have another rematch? I mean, was he up for another rematch, or was it just after that he was like, I'm not interested?
I said, I told him, I said, I didn't even, when I was standing in the ring, when he stopped the fight, my honest thought was that he was getting us up because it was, to me, it was obvious, and that he was letting me rest. But then all of a sudden he brought us to the center, and I was like, what is he doing? I thought he was going to call it a no contest. Like we would go back and do it again. And I was like, so I'm thinking, wow, why don't they just let me rest? Like in my mind, this is what I'm thinking. I'm not thinking fight's over at all. And then he raises both of our hands, and I was like, damn, I got to go do this again. I got to go train. I got to get prepared again. Because he raised both of our hands. And then he drops mine and says, by knockout, hoist. And I was like, oh, what?
That must have infuriated you.
I didn't know until they actually raised his hand that they were awarding him the fight. I literally was confused. Like, what just happened?
Yeah. It's interesting because, you know, going back to UFC 5, we never saw Royce Gracie fight again in the UFC until he fought Matt Hughes. So, I mean, after that fight at UFC 5, did you want to rematch with him within that time? Because obviously you were keeping going. I mean, this was when you became super fight champion at UFC 6, when you beat Dan Severn with that guillotine. If I'm honest with you, right, that is the most brutal guillotine choke I have ever seen. Because not only, I mean, a guillotine choke is painful anyway, but when he was sat, like the way he was sat and the way you pulled his head forward like this, I was like, his head's going to fall off. I mean, he tapped like Pat Smith tapped with the ankle lock. He was like this, wasn't he? You know, hitting the mat. You know, when you went in to fight Dan Severn, I mean, Dan Severn was walking through everyone at the time. I think he just won the Ultimate 95, didn't he?
Yes. Yeah. He was the best. And literally I was the underdog, even though I was the one he was challenging. And I was the underdog. And I kept thinking to myself, how is he going to, how is he going to beat me? Is he going to wrestle me to death? Because he ain't going to outstrike me, and he's not going to hit me. So how is he going to beat me?
Yeah, because what I found with Dan Severn as well, the way he fought is he never really finished anybody, did he? He was, you know, the only way he ever finished someone really was with basic submissions, you know, like an arm triangle or something like that. Or it would just be like just repeated strikes. And I was just
suplexing him, you know, over there.
I mean, when he did that suplex, I mean, he suplexed Anthony Macias at UFC 4. I mean, Anthony Sears was like half of his weight. It was like me playing wrestling with my little brother. Do you know what I mean? It was like crazy how we done that. But so when you went into fight Dan Severn, how confident were you when you went into that fight? Because obviously, you know, submissions wise, he had nothing on you.
Right. I was really confident. I just couldn't see a way I could lose because I was in good shape. I could wrestle, and even if he out wrestled me, there was no way he was going to be able to outmaneuver me in the submission game, and it wasn't going to outcondition me. So I just didn't understand how the odds were being set up where I was the underdog, because I was like, he doesn't have any of the skill sets to actually beat me. So how is he going to win? And so going into that match, I was very, very, very confident, but not like I had been when I fought Hoyce, you know, where I didn't study and understand how I could be beat. So I was very educated on who Severn was and what his strengths and weaknesses were. And that's how I went after him, was in his weaknesses with his head, because he shot in like a wrestler. And so I took advantage of that mistake that he made a couple times. And so, but I just never really saw an opportunity for him to actually beat me. And in fact, I remember after I had beaten him, even years after that, he complained about me being on steroids. And I laughed at him and I said, "You're complaining because I put on some weight. I went up to 227 pounds and you weigh 260 pounds and you're 6'4" and I'm 5'11". And you're complaining that I put on weight to be able to make this thing a little bit even?
Yeah, I know. It's crazy, isn't it?
That makes sense.
Yeah, but it's crazy because I remember you talking. It was on what was that show that Bass Rutten and Kenny Rice used to host? MMA. You were talking about the drug testing, because I mean the way you Sada are now, I just feel that it's a bit too much. I mean, have you seen a documentary? It's called Game Changers, about the vegan diet and everything.
Yes.
I was watching that, right? And these athletes were saying, I've gone vegan, you know, I'm the best I've ever been at my sport. And I thought it wouldn't surprise me, you know, if you Sada went, "I'm sorry, but I'm testing you. You tested positive for sweet potato fries." Do you know what I mean? Yeah. "I'm sorry, but you haven't passed the drug test. We're going to strip you from your title." I think it's ridiculous. I mean, I remember you saying on that show, you just said, "Look, fuck it, let everybody take them." You know what I mean?
Yeah, because I felt like, you know, there's a safe level that people can do. It's like a race car engine. I mean, you're literally, every time that you go to train for a fight, is you're blowing your engine at a high pace. I mean, you're literally hitting it hard all the time. Therefore, you've got to be able to recover. You've got to have your body able to recover and keep doing it the next day. And so for me, I think that there's a healthy way to do it, and I always have thought that there is a healthy way to do it. You can't tell me that the sports that we know today, it doesn't include enhancements. It does in every sport. It's just that they've learned how to do it safer. They've learned how to make it more of a opportunity for people to be healthy and be able to compete at their highest level, their highest natural level, without going in and looking like something that, you know, you're going in there and you're getting tired and you can't keep up with everyone, because that's what it'll do when you don't do it the right way. So for me, having a doctor and being able to have a doctor monitor what it is you're doing, it allows you to be able to compete for many years after and be able to stay healthy and not get into a situation where you're hurting yourself.
Yeah, because I mean, I know guys who, the last time I was training, actually, was one of the lads, he was like that. And then I saw him in training again, and he was built. And we were in the clinch, and we were just wrestling. And we're in the clinch, and I went, "These Diana balls have clearly helped you, haven't they?" And he was like, "I haven't taken anything. I haven't taken." I was like, "Of course you have, mate." I said, but the difference with that, right, is this guy, you know, he goes out, he drinks, you know, does other things. And I thought, that's not the way to do it. You know what I mean? If you're going to do it, monetize it, like you said, because Hulk Hogan was doing exactly the same. You know, he had a doctor, you know, examining how he was taking them. You know, so like you say, there is a correct way of doing it. And I think USADA now, I just think it is. I mean, what are your views on USADA? You probably think the same as I do with regards to, you know, they're getting a bit stupid with the testing.
It is because there's that. I know at one time they were allowing the TRT, and I thought that was a really smart thing because it is about the athletes being able to stay healthy and be able to compete day in and day out because it's a career. It's not something that you're doing in college or high school. It's a career. And so therefore you got to make sure that your body's able to, especially when you get injuries, which is really important, people to recover quick. And so I think when it's done in that situation, like the TRT, I think that was the smart way to go because I know a lot of other sports, the big sports, allow guys certain grievances in that where it's okay as long as you're within a certain amount of growth. So again, it's a sensitive talk because a lot of people who on the outside looking in don't understand how it works, or because a lot of people just say he's on steroids and you're looking at him and you're going, what are you talking about? What is a steroid? Because a lot of them all put the same stuff in the same basket. When you're talking about growth hormone, when you're talking about cypionate, ethionate, propionate, all these things that you naturally already have in your body, all you're doing is putting in there, especially when you get an injury or when you're training, is to keep those levels elevated at a normal level. You don't allow them to drop off because that's when injuries happen. That's when you get tired. That's when other things start to happen. And also when you talk about sex drive, a lot of people use this stuff when it comes to the sex part of it because people's testosterone are low. So they are not able to really have a very quality life of a relationship with a woman or a man because things have dropped. So even in estrogen for women. So there's a lot of stuff that they use that for to help the body actually recover and be able to perform at a natural level. So when people say that, I look at them and I know that they're uneducated about what they're talking about. They don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, it's crazy because, I mean, these are people generally on Twitter. People on Twitter, like, really, you can see they get my goat because a lot of people don't really know what they're talking about. I mean, a lot of people I've spoken to, some people I've spoken to have said things like, yeah, well, because they look at obviously the WWE roster and they say, oh, well, he's clearly on steroids. I'm like, yeah, well, he probably is. But have you seen how much he has to bench press? Have you seen how much he has to shoulder press to be in that shape? Do you know what I mean? Like, people just don't understand.
Well, they're on the road. I mean, half their life, and they got to be in gyms, and they're wrestling 4 times a week, and their bodies are getting beat up. So a lot, like I said, it's people that are standing on the outside looking in are the ones that are talking because they don't understand what it is that they're going through and what they're doing. There are some of them that abuse it, no question. But I see a lot of people who look at me and go, man, you're abusing. You know what, man? I'm 56 years old. I still look good. Do you think if I would have started this when I was in my teens or in my young 20s, that I would still be able to have the reaction that I have now when I'm in training in the gym? If I abused steroids my whole life, I ask any doctor or anybody that knows anything about the steroids, is that when you're on long uses of that stuff, years and years of it, your body looks like it's 100 years old. Do I look like 100 years old? No, because I never abused it.
No, that's the thing. I mean, if you did abuse the steroid, because obviously, you hear with WWE wrestlers at a time when it was used heavily, there was people abusing it. That's why they were dropping down dead of heart attacks when they were like 40 odd years old. But not only that, they were mixing other things with it. Like I was saying earlier on about some people I know, they were on bloody cocaine, they were on drinking alcohol, they were just, that's when you have the concoction of everything. Quickly moving on, Ken, before we go, and thank you so much for your time. Having you as a guest on the first one, hopefully it will get the ball rolling to get more guests on this, because this has been a dream come true for me. It really has. Moving on to, we'll quickly go to UFC 7 when you fought Oleg Taktarov. That was another draw. Did that frustrate you when, after the fight with Royce Gracie at UFC 5, that they hadn't done anything really about the judging system?
Yeah, it did, but that one was squarely on me. you know, I had trained with Oleg in the gym, and I was able to just knock him into the next world. In fact, he even says it in my new book coming out. But again, like I said, I should have been able to go in and destroy him. I did not. Again, another one in my career where I felt like I went in there and I didn't go in to actually win the fight. I was too worried about business. I was too worried about knowing him and wanting him to compete in Pancras for the Lions Den. And so when I went in to fight him, my idea was just to kind of beat him, like not go in and try to submit him because he wouldn't tap. I'd break his leg. Therefore, he wouldn't be able to. And I was just trying to go in there and actually win the fight. And I remember hitting him, trying to knock him out, because I knew at least that way he'd be able to fight in Pancras with no injuries and just knock him out. He'd recover and go fight again. But he had a strong chin too. Like I knocked him out twice in the fight, and then I hit him again and I woke him up. So he was a tough character. But again, like when I fought that fight, I truly did not go in there to win the fight at any cost. I went in there to try and win the fight the easiest way. And so that one was on me. Oleg put on a good fight. Oleg went out and did his best. But again, like I said, with me, I just didn't go in and do what I knew I should have been able to do. That was one of my other letdowns.
Yeah, yeah. And moving on to UFC 8 as well, I was surprised actually that they had Kimo fighting you in a super fight, because the last time Kimo fought was when he fought Royce Gracie. Obviously, people were saying that he hurt Royce Gracie, but obviously, like you said, it was the exhaustion. That's the reason Royce Gracie couldn't continue. But prior to the fight that you had with Kimo, he actually beat Pat Smith twice in different organizations. And I actually didn't know that until I looked it up, because I was thinking, why would they put Kimo? So Kimo was a tough fight. I mean, what did you think about Kimo fighting you in the super fight? Do you think he deserved that shot at you?
Yeah, I thought it was a great, actually a good matchup. There's some history there. He had been training a lot longer, because like when I fought him, he had no experience, so what he did to Royce was tremendous. He pushed him. And he had no experience. Like he had no submission skills. He was basically a street fighter. So he came in raw and put on a good showing. Now he's training with jiu-jitsu players. He's training with striking. So now he's much better. And his size and his strength is comparable to mine. And so I thought it was a great matchup. It was a test for me. But luckily for me, he dropped his head and I was able to land the knee, because otherwise I think the night could have been a lot different. I think it might have been a tougher fight. We could have probably gone later into the fight. And I think I still would have won, just because I thought my conditioning was better. Yeah. But I thought that he could have probably done a lot more damage to me, because he was big and strong and his skill sets were a lot better. I just happened to get lucky early on and be able to take him out without taking any damage.
Yeah, that was the second fight that you had with him, wasn't it? When you were in the clinch and you hit him with the knee. Yes. But I mean, you got him with a lovely knee bar, didn't you? In the first fight that you had with him at UFC 8.
He was really, like I said, he was very inexperienced. So, but when I fought him the second time, he was definitely a well-rounded fighter, and I knew he'd be much tougher. So, like I said, it was a gift from God, because I think that fight, if not that didn't happen, I think we would have been in for a rough night.
Yeah. But then that just goes to show what we were talking about at the beginning of this interview, about your mental state. And that's what you were drumming into the guys at the Lions Den. And going back to UFC 3, when Royce Gracie gave up because he was exhausted, if he'd have had that training on top of his jiu-jitsu, he probably could have carried on in that tournament, Finally, Ken, moving on to UFC 9, Dan Severn. Well, there was all sorts going on before that, wasn't there? I mean, there was all kinds of politics going on. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, is that the one we went to Dothan?
Yeah, that's one. Yeah.
Yeah, we had to pack up and we had to fly out. It was crazy, because it was like this 24/7. Like next thing you know, we're here, and then 24 hours later, we got to jump on a plane and fly somewhere else. It was crazy. And I didn't actually fight on that card, but I know Jerry Bolander and a few other guys did, and that was tough to get people prepared and fight in a quick notice like that. And again, it was during that time where every time we went somewhere, there was a political battle. So it was rough. It was a rough go all the way through the UFC until Bob Myers actually sold it because he was losing money and constantly in battle.
Yeah.
So it was for fighters and for the organization. It was really a tough time to have to go through these things because I was like the face of the organization at that time, and I was constantly doing interviews and defending ourselves on what we were doing.
Yeah, because I remember when I first saw, when I first found out about UFC, I saw it on the news, and that was when Keith Hackney dropped Emmanuel Yarbrough with that open hand strike, and they were like, "This needs to be banned." And I was about 8, 9 year old at the time. I was like, "No, this is brilliant. Where can I see this?" Do you know what I mean? So fair play for him to try and save the organization, because obviously, and before that UFC 9 as well, didn't you get told that you weren't allowed to punch? And if you did punch, you got arrested. And Dan Severn punched you how many times in that fight?
Yeah, that was true. Yeah,
and he never saw a jail cell, did he? So I was thinking, wow.
But they did the week before. They did the week before in Canada, which was just over the bridge. Guys got arrested, and that's why I chose not to, because I saw what happened the week before was they did arrest guys. Yeah. So I decided, you know what, I can't do that. Because I got to move on with kids, and I'm telling them, you stay within the rules, you can achieve whatever you want. So it was, I had a lot of responsibility to do the right thing there. And so I did.
Yeah. Well, that just goes to show, Ken, not only are you a legend of an MMA fighter, you're also a man who's got morals, and you're a gentleman. And this has been incredible. Thank you so much for coming on. And it'd be great to catch up with you again sometime. Thank you so much.
Hey, listen, I appreciate you, man. And good luck, man. Good luck.
Bless you. Thank you so much.
Take care.